Hello.
Hi, Kate.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you well. Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed.
All right.
Okay, so we have Bruce Gagnon here. You are the founder and coordinator of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. You have an interesting background. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm keeping an eye on the time here. It's 3:09. Sorry, I'm a little late. I had a few technical problems. I'll try to keep it to a half hour. You can remind me. And you have a really impressive background. You're from Florida originally, as I understand, and you're a Vietnam veteran. You were a young Republican. I briefly was myself way back, and you've been a lifelong activist. So you've been involved in like 30 something years activism against the militarization of space, and you're an anti-war activist, and now you're in Maine. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I didn't
Okay.
go to Vietnam, but I was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And that's where I became a peace activist.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Do you prefer peace activist or anti-war activist, or does it matter?
Uh, I don't think it matters. I'm an anti-imperialist in the tradition of Mark Twain.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. He was in the Anti-Imperialist League. That's fairly interesting. And you've been activist against militarization of space and now against war. You had a really interesting article in Strategic Culture magazine, or an interview rather, in Strategic Culture, which by the way is blocked in the US. You need a VPN to get it. Um, about the Ukraine war, the Ukraine situation. So how do you see the Ukraine war playing out? And I think we're politically roughly on the same page about the situation. So it's been going on for 8 years, and the Donbass war. How do you see it playing out? What do you see the end game?
Well, I think Russia felt compelled after the US orchestrated coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014 during the Obama administration,
Right.
where the US inserted a right wing government backed up by the muscle of Nazis. Uh, and they immediately began killing Russian ethnic citizens in the Donbass region, which is eastern Ukraine, very near the Russian border.
Mhm.
Over the years, in this 8 years, the Nazis have killed 14,000 Russian ethnic Ukrainian citizens and injured more than 34,000.
Mhm.
So Russia has always felt compelled to try to stop that killing and protect people. And for many years, they used every diplomatic avenue possible, constantly talking with every Western government, every Western leader, including the United States, who was really behind the whole thing. And it really wasn't ever getting any better. It was only getting worse. And then Russia learned in late February that the US was pushing the Ukrainian government to do a full onslaught of the Donbass region. Over the years, the Ukrainian government has established about a troop level of about 180,000 troops along the line of contact there in the Donbass region.
Right.
And Russia learned that they were going to do a full onslaught. And so at that point, on February 24th, Russia preempted that and sent troops into the region, and is now, after all this time, is now really having great success in defeating or getting the Ukrainian troops to surrender, either defeating them or getting them to surrender. So I think, the question is, what's the West going to do now that their side is losing? All we've been hearing in the mainstream corporate media is that Russia was losing, Ukraine was having victory after victory, but it was all lies. Russia's been taking their time intentionally because they wanted to limit the number of civilians that were being killed. They wanted to limit the number of Ukrainian conscript soldiers that were being killed. And but so now the question becomes, what's the U.S. and NATO going to do? You know, the U.S. has just appropriated $40 billion more for this war. 2019 RAND Corporation study says that the U.S. will use Ukraine as a hammer to try to destabilize and overextend and unbalance Russia. And I think it's all about climate change, really. Because of climate change and the melting of the Arctic ice, the resource extraction corporations want to go up into the Arctic and drill, baby, drill. But Russia has the largest land border with the Arctic. They have the largest resource base of any country in the world. And so this whole thing, I think, is about trying to destabilize, force regime change in Moscow. And recently we've heard the United States government, including Biden himself, saying we want regime change in Moscow. And so what do you expect Russia to do when the US is militarily encircling them, is pounding the hell out of Russian ethnic citizens just on the other side of the border in eastern Ukraine, and wants to take them out and balkanize them so they can take control of the Arctic region. Right. The day that that this war started on February 24th, the US and NATO began a military war game called Cold Response on the Norwegian-Russian border. Mm-hmm. So it's no coincidence that US and NATO were doing this war game, practicing fighting with Russia up in the Arctic region. So I think Russia really had no other choice than to intervene.
Right. Apparently Zelensky and others are saying that privately he was told that you're not joining NATO, but he was told by the US to publicly keep saying you're going to join NATO. I don't know if this is true or not, but if it is true, it looks like it was deliberate provocation. The US was trying to provoke a Russian response. Do you think that makes some sense?
I've heard the same thing that you've heard. So I think it's pretty much true. And also we've heard Zelensky, although we're not allowed to use a Z anymore. Zelensky doesn't want anyone, so we have to call him Elinsky.
Elinsky, right. I've been hearing
that.
Yes.
But anyway, Elinsky, we've also heard him say that he wants nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
That was scary.
Which would be a real problem.
Yeah.
So.
And also there's stories, strong allegations that the U.S. had has between 20 and 30 biowarfare labs in Ukraine. That's a game changer. There's a Bulgarian independent journalist, I forget her name offhand, but then the Russian Ministry of Defense, they claim to have the hard copy of documents. What's her name? Victoria Nuland, like spilled the beans in testimony. I believe it was the Senate Intelligence Committee. Marco Rubio asked her, and she basically said as much. Well, our U.S. does have labs, but we didn't let the Russians get hold of them. That seemed like it was so. It's hard to see what's going on, but that's pretty provocative. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, you're right about everything you just said there.
Yeah. What would you say? I don't agree with this, but many people on the left say that, like, okay, it's a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, but it doesn't matter because Russia is also capitalist. Like both the U.S. and Russia are capitalist imperialist countries, so the left shouldn't take a side on this. I disagree, but what would be, I'm hearing this a lot from people on the left, what would be your response to this?
Well, Russia is definitely a capitalist country.
Yeah.
Well, what has that got to do with anything? The United States is trying to start a war with another nuclear power usually the US likes to go to war with countries that can't fight back, right? Grenada, Panama, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, although Afghanistan kicked our ass after 20 years.
Yeah.
So what makes the United States think that it has the right to go around the world picking fights with other countries all the time? So I think this war has to be opposed from the, I think we have to name the US as the provocative agent. Let me put it that way. Because clearly the US has set this up. Again, the Rand Corporation study from 2019 makes it real clear that that's the agenda of the US long before this war started, 2019. So I think it's obvious what's really going on and why and who's responsible, who started this fight. So I think any good anti-imperialist must condemn the US and NATO for this activity. And now they're also acknowledging in Washington that they want to take out China too. They want regime change in China. So the United States, that couldn't beat Afghanistan in 20 years, along with the help of NATO countries, wants to pick a fight, not only with Russia, but China too at the same time. I mean, it's foolhardy. So, the US is bound to lose. And already we're seeing the blowback on the economies of the US and Europe as a result of these sanctions that have backfired and are now hitting home. The chickens have come home to roost.
Right. The oil, the gas for rubles. Putin carried out what some people call a judo move. He said, okay, basically it looks like the European countries are going to buy the gas and then seize the payments when it was still in Europe. So Putin or the Russian government was able to turn that around, said, okay, you have to pay in rubles now. He was able to turn that around. And now there's talk about embargo of Russian gas, but it's not really working because the European economy would just collapse. The economist Michael Hudson he thinks, and other people think, that it's a war against Russia. It's also a war against US allies like Germany. It's destroying the German economy, kind of preventing any type of Eurasian integration. It's really almost deliberately destroying the economy of Europe. Would you agree with that, or think there's something to that?
Yeah, I think he's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So how long do you think the war in Ukraine will go on? Do you think it will continue for a while? Do you think it will go on for a few more weeks or a few more months, or what do you think would happen?
Well, it's going to depend on Washington. It would have been over already if the US wasn't forcing the NATO countries to send weapons. If the US wasn't sending weapons, it would have been over already.
Right.
And now the question is, is the US, this $40 billion, is the US, the US has already said that they want to essentially create another Afghanistan situation.
Right.
Put Russia in a situation where they have this bloody ongoing war on their border that destabilizes them. It's all part of this regime change plan. Washington believes that if they can create this situation, that it will cause Russian citizens to eventually replace Putin because they'll blame him for it. But the truth is, it's going the other way. Putin's approval rating is increased up to about 80% now.
Yeah.
The Russian people, from all that I've heard, and I have several friends there that I talk to regularly, that are telling me that people are more united than ever.
Right.
So everything the United States has tried to do has been a complete and utter failure. But it indicates how desperate the US is and how desperate the West is, the US and the European Union. Because they're worried about this multipolar world that is coming into existence. This old idea of the US being the king of the hill with its friends in Europe, especially England, being the lapdogs, the junior partners of this empire. Well, they can't stand the idea of emerging countries like Russia and China and Iran, Brazil, Venezuela. I mean, you can go down the list, they can't stand the thought of it. And it means that they're going to lose their global hegemony. And so this is their last desperate chance, they believe, to try to stop this. And if it means blowing up the world in order to do so, they don't care, because these people are sick. These people, these neocons, these globalists, they are very sick people. And sadly, they control the media in the West, and they've been able to bring along a lot of people in the United States and throughout Europe into believing their whole story, which is now collapsing. Their whole fabricated, what I call CIA talking points, script written by Hollywood and Madison Avenue. It's collapsing. And I think as that collapse happens, more and more people are going to come around. So to answer your question, I don't know how long it's going to last, because it's going to really depend on the United States. It's going to depend on the American citizens. Do you want your gasoline prices to keep rising? Do you want food prices to keep rising? Do you want your home heating oil or propane to keep rising? If so, keep this war going. If you want to have a livable situation here in this country, then get our country out of this war, develop a realistic and honest, peaceful relationship with Russia and China, and stop trying to run the world. So, it's really up to the American people, I think, at this point, to figure out which way they want to go.
Right, right. Do you think this conflict could lead to a world war, to a wider conflict? There's some evidence Poland may be getting involved, or other countries, Moldova. Do you think it could expand?
Yep. Poland is already reportedly sending in a couple battalions of troops into Ukraine. They've long desired getting back three provinces in Western Ukraine that border the Polish border, that many years back were part of Poland.
Right.
They want that territory back, and they want even more territory from Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine is where the Nazis predominate. During World War II, when Hitler invaded the former Soviet Union and swept through Ukraine, a nationalist Ukrainian by the name of Stefan Bandera put on a Nazi uniform, and his followers joined Hitler in killing tens of thousands of Jews, Poles, and also Russian ethnic citizens. And so this is the region where these current present day Nazis are coming from. And this is where the United States has been training them at various bases for several years now, arming them and then sending them to Eastern Ukraine to shell the people in the Donbass, their fellow citizens in the Donbass, whose only crime is that they speak Russian.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's stories the U.S. military trained the Azov Battalion for a time, I think in North Carolina, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I think it was. It was very controversial. What do you see as the role of the neo-Nazi or far right-wing groups in Ukraine today? Do they play a major role, or are they peripheral?
And they play a huge role.
Yeah.
Firstly, as frontline troops. I'm told, and I've read this many times, that every single military Ukrainian army unit has Nazis in it, and their job is to shoot anybody in the back that tries to surrender or escape. So they have a huge role. After the US coup in 2014, several of the key security positions in the new government had Nazis installed as leaders in those departments, security, military departments, things like that. And the Nazis made it clear when Zelensky got elected, he ran on a platform of ending the civil war that had been raging since the 2014 coup. It was the people in the Donbass, one of the largest population centers in Ukraine, that essentially voted for him because they wanted to end the war, because they were the ones being shelled all the time. They were the ones being attacked. So after Zelensky got elected, the Nazis told him, don't you dare try to end this war. If you do, we'll kill you. And so that was the end of his peace effort, so to speak.
Right.
And so the Nazis play a huge role, and they also are used as an incitement tool because Nazis around Europe and all over the world, including the United States, have been going to Ukraine to join the fight along with the Ukrainian Nazis. So they've been used to instigate more Nazi behavior in other countries as well. So I think they played a really important role. And the US has always known that, that there were Nazis involved, even though they like to try to deny it and try to pretend that they don't exist.
Right, right. There's a story that early on when he was elected, Zelensky initially ordered one of the militias to stand down. They refused to obey orders. He had some kind of nervous breakdown, like, I'm the president of Ukraine, I'm not a loser. And then after that, though, and they refused to obey orders, after that, he acquiesced and he knew who was really calling the shots. And I believe he awarded the commander of the Azov battalion the Ukrainian Medal of Honor or something. He kind of quickly figured out who was running the shots. Yeah.
That's right. I've seen the video. Actually, the Nazis filmed that exchange when he came to the front line. I've seen the video where that whole discussion, just as you articulated, took place.
Yeah, interesting. Well, what would you say to people who say, well, Ukraine can't have Nazis, it has a Jewish president, Zelensky is Jewish? I get that all the time. What would you respond to that?
I'd say they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, right, I agree. Right.
I think it's that simple. You know, people, when you listen to the mainstream media and you read the New York Times and the Washington Post and you watch MSNBC and CNN and all the rest of them, you're bound to think stupid things and say stupid things. It doesn't mean you're smart. It doesn't mean you're right. It just means that you're reading from the same script that the media is, that the CIA handed to them. You know, during the 1970s, the Church Committee, Senator Frank Church from Idaho, had committee hearings about the CIA's involvement in the media. It was called Operation Mockingbird. And they disclosed in these congressional hearings, they're available, some of the testimonies are available on YouTube videos. Just look up Operation Mockingbird, Senator Church. And they disclosed that there were at least 400 known CIA plants inside of Western corporate media that were essentially writing the stories or handing the stories to editors with CIA talking points. So if they had 400 in the 1970s, today I imagine they have thousands of CIA operatives. We know Anderson Cooper, CIA agent, you know, on CNN, you know, so, you know, the media is loaded with them. So they're going to convince, if you listen to them, they're going to convince all kinds of American people with these kind of stories. You know, Zelensky's a Zionist, or Alinsky, excuse me. Alinsky is a Zionist. Right. You know, there's all kinds of Zionists, which to me are not much difference between a Zionist and a Nazi. Just ask the Palestinian people.
Right, that's interesting. All right. okay, where the U.S. media is very tightly controlled by the security state, yeah, from in NPR to CNN to Fox News. What would you say is a good source of alternate information, alternate media to find out a more accurate picture of what's going on? What would you advise people to turn to?
Well, you mentioned strategic, what is it?
Culture?
Culture Foundation, right?
Right.
That's a really good one.
They're good. Yeah.
Consortium News
Right.
is very good. I read Everyday Sputnik. I read RT.
Right.
Um,
RT Sputnik.
yeah, the Saker.
Yeah, Vineyard of the Saker. Yeah, I read that.
Everything I've learned about Ukraine, I learned from the Saker,
Right.
which I think it's a blog, but it's called The Saker, Saker.
Okay. Right.
And also my blog. I spend hours every day reading all kinds of media from all over the world. The Cradle, for example, is very
Really
good.
good.
It gives you
Pepe
media
Escobar is some
from
good
the
stuff.
Asia
Yeah.
Pacific.
Right.
Yep, Pepe Escobar. Yep. And then I put stuff on my blog. My blog is called Organizing Notes.
Okay. I'll probably go into it.
Notes. Organizing Notes. Maybe you'd put a link in the description of this video to my blog.
Cool.
So, there's all kinds of sources if a person is willing to open their mind, get outside of the kind of the corral, the Western media corral, get outside, break out, there's all kinds of information out there in the real world.
Mhm. Right. Moon of Alabama is another one.
Yeah.
Finally, what do you think? What should what should people be doing who oppose what's happening? What do you advise the best course of action? What do you think the areas people should be working on who are really opposed what's the U.S. is doing?
Well, I think first thing is to diversify your media sources, as we were just talking about. That's very important. And then to share them with everybody you know, your friends, your relatives, your coworkers. Share that information repeatedly on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, social media platform you use. That's number one. Number two, quit listening and believing the mainstream media because it's just brainwashing.
Right.
It's a waste of time. I don't really spend hardly any time watching any of the mainstream media or listening to it anymore. It's because it's crap.
It is.
It's just pure crap.
I totally agree. CNN is horrible.
And then I think tomorrow's Thursday. I live in Brunswick. Myself and about 5 other people, we're going to be standing on a corner in the busiest part of town at noon for an hour.
Okay.
Holding signs. My sign is going to say, "No war with Russia, stop NATO." And so I think being public, being out on the street, we've been doing this since February, every week.
Okay.
And sometimes we go to Topsom, sometimes we go to Freeport. We've gone down to Portland, but mostly we do it in Brunswick.
Okay.
So anyway, I think that's really important. And then writing about it on blogs or whatever else you can do, sharing what you've learned with others. And then I know this doesn't do a hell of a lot of good because the Congress is under control of the political elite, of the corporate oligarchs, but I still send a message to our senators and our representatives just out of pure spite, just to tell them that I know they're a sad bunch of characters.
Right.
So I think it's still important to let them know that you're not falling for the bullshit.
Right, right, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I live in Wyndham outside Portland. I may join you guys sometime. Okay, finally, is there anything else you'd like to add? My dogs are getting very restless here. Is there anything else you'd like to?
I see that. I see that dog there. I can
Yeah,
see it, part of it in the
exactly.
chair there. Yeah. Well, I guess finally, I'd like to say this about NATO expansion. At the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, the uh, the head of the Soviet Union was Mikhail Gorbachev, and he was promised by the United States and the European leaders that if he would agree to the reunification of Germany, both East and West Germany, that NATO would not expand 1 inch towards the former Soviet Union, towards Russia. So he agreed. And then when Bill Clinton became president, he started what he called NATO enhancement. And since that time, NATO has been expanding up to the Russian border on steroids. And they now have regular war games right on the Russian doorstep. And in addition, the US has built 2 launch facilities in Romania and Poland, where they can fire first strike attack, nuclear capable cruise missiles that would be able to reach Russia in a matter of a few minutes.
Right.
This is a Cuban Missile Crisis in reverse. Imagine if Russia was putting bases and missile launch facilities in Mexico or Canada right on our borders. Washington would go ballistic. But we do it to Russia, and they're supposed to swallow it. They're supposed to keep their mouth shut. They're supposed to accept it. And the American people don't know anything about it because our media doesn't tell us anything about it. Well, it's not a fair game. It's not an honest game. And so it's no wonder that Russia has ultimately responded. And for those that don't understand why Russia has responded, you need to really learn the whole story, the history, and what's happening currently. Because again, the corporate media ain't telling anybody about it.
Right.
So let me just say, Kate, thank you very much for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed. And I will provide a link to your blog.
All right.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Okay,
Take
bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.